Thesis statements are really the underpinning to a successful essay. So we're going to take just a few moments to talk about what constitutes a thesis statement and look at a few samples. So first and foremost, a thesis statement is going to be the writer's main idea. It's what you're looking to establish in your essay. It's the answer to the question that's embedded in the prompt. So whatever the essay prompt is asking you to write about, your thesis statement is going to answer that question. It's typically located as the last sentence in your introductory paragraph. For Comp 1, that's where I expect to see it, in the last sentence of the introductory paragraph. It's also considered a contract with the audience. It's what you're committing to write about. This can cause a problem if your thesis says you're going to write about one thing, but then the body of your paper is about something totally different. You have to fix that problem, otherwise you have a coherence issue. So if you get a really great idea as you're writing the body of your paper and you change something that you said you were writing about in your thesis, just go back and alter your thesis to match your actual paper. We want those matching. And ultimately, the thesis statement is going to answer your reader's biggest question. What's your point? Why are we reading this paper? Now, when you're writing a thesis statement, you're going to have three basic parts: the topic, what the paper is about; the position, where does the writer stand; and the rationale, why is this writer's point valid? So think about it in these terms: topic, position, rationale, TPR. So if we look at this step by step, first and foremost, we want to find our topic. The topic is the subject that you're writing about. Then you want to take a position. The position is your opinion about the subject you're writing about, what you think about the topic. Now, keep in mind that this is talking about opinions and your thoughts. When we're writing academically, we're not going to write, I think The Simpsons are better than Futurama. You would simply say, The Simpsons are better than Futurama to get your position across. We understand that because you're writing the paper, it's your opinion. And then finally, you have to establish your rationale. The rationale is your reason or justification for holding the position or opinion. Why is the position true? What avenues are you going to use to explore your position, to convince your reader to agree with you? There are a variety of common mistakes that students make when they're writing their thesis statements. The first is that the thesis is too broad. You say something like, The Simpsons is the best show ever. Okay, well, maybe you feel that way, but if you're writing a paper of 1,000 words, you can't cover everything that makes that true. There would just be too much. So we would want to narrow that down. It could be that the statement does not represent the content of the paper adequately. We talked about this earlier. Your paper content and your thesis must match. It could be that the statement describes a fact rather than a claim. This really goes into the concept of fact and opinion. If you said that the Simpsons debuted in 1989, well, that's a fact. It's not anything that you're going to set out to prove. We can look that up and we know that's true. But if we say The Simpsons, which debuted in 1989, is the most impressive animated show, well, there we have a topic and a position we can work with. We also want to avoid statements of personal opinion, such as in my opinion or I believe. You're going to, for academic writing, typically leave yourself out of it. The statement, another mistake can be that the statement is in the wrong format or the type of paper, for the type of paper you're writing about. We can talk about that a little bit more later. Sometimes statements are oversimplified or they contain the 3-point list. While you might be tempted to write something like The Simpsons, which debuted in 1989, is the most amazing animated show of all time because of its longevity, its ability to predict events that will happen, and its wit. While we like to use those 3 points, that kind of limits you to 3 paragraphs. And when we're writing at the collegiate level, we often write more paragraphs than that. So we would want to avoid that 3-point list a lot of times. Now, if you can't figure out how to write a specific thesis that also avoids the 3-point list, use the 3-point list. But we really want to start moving beyond that list and write a more mature thesis statement. So let's look at the following. We have an example of a weak thesis. Drug use is detrimental to society. This is true. It is. It's holding a position, but it's pretty broad. So let's make it stronger. Illegal drug use is detrimental because it encourages gang violence. Here we have a topic, illegal drug use. We have a position, it's detrimental. And we also have a rationale because it encourages gang violence. So we know that we're going to narrow in on how drugs and gang violence are connected. Here's another example of a weak thesis. Pollution is bad for the environment. Let's make that stronger. Because a large portion of air pollution comes from automobiles, America's anti-pollution efforts should focus on privately owned cars. Here, we're taking a position and we're looking at a specific rationale that this is the result of air pollution from automobiles. Here's another one. Barn owls should be protected. If we want to make that stronger and more specific, we could say barn owls' nests should not be eliminated from barns because the owls help farmers by eliminating insects and rodents. Here, we can write a paper about how the owls are beneficial to farmers. Now we're going to look at 3 different versions of the same thesis. This one says, this essay will discuss reducing sugar consumption by elementary students. Okay, what we have here is the writer referring specifically to the essay, which we really don't like in collegiate writing, unless you're operating in like a scientific field. Sometimes they like that, but in most essay writing, we're not going to say this essay will. A stronger variety of this thesis might be more attention should be paid to the food and beverage choices available to elementary students. That would be acceptable, but we can make it even stronger. Look how much better this next one is. Because elementary students consume 9 times the daily recommended allowance for sugar, schools should replace soda machines with healthier alternatives. You see, what's happening with this one and why it's stronger is because you're narrowing in on a version of what school students are consuming in schools that isn't so broad, but it's also broad enough that you can write plenty about it. Now, when I'm grading your thesis statements, I think it's important for you to know that there's basically a 0 to 4 scale on the rubric. The first is the essay doesn't contain a thesis. And what that means is I can't find your thesis statement. I know you might have a thesis. It might be somewhere there, but it's not clear to the reader. On that 4-point scale, you could earn a 1, which is your next to lowest score, which would be that you include a reference to the self or essay. You're going to use one of those phrases like in this essay or in my opinion or I believe. We want to avoid those. You could earn a 2 by writing an essay that's too broad. Pollution is bad for the environment. That's too broad for what we're trying to do. You can earn 3 out of 4 points with the 3-point thesis. Air pollution is bad for the environment because of X, Y, and Z. That's a thesis that can work. It's more specific, but it's not as sophisticated as the thesis you would write to earn full credit, which would be the sophisticated thesis. Because a large portion of air pollution comes from automobiles, America's anti-pollution efforts should focus on privately owned cars. So here we're going to see a more sophisticated thesis that does not use that X, Y, and Z, but there's still plenty to talk about. It's not too broad. Pollution is bad for the environment. But it's also not just, I'm going to talk about X, Y, and Z. There's many paragraphs that I can write. I can focus on air pollution from automobiles, the statistics. I can look at ways that air pollution from automobiles is currently what work's being done to reduce that. I can talk about the cost of doing this. Any number of things that I can talk about that aren't just the X, Y, and Z. this was just a brief introduction to thesis statements. In the next activity, you are going to practice writing thesis statements, and I will provide you some feedback after you submit your assignment. So I encourage you to use this video and have a look over this video multiple times to make sure you really understand everything.